One is unmuted and, oh no. That's good now, I
They're coming through your laptop. And we'll see what we're still getting it. And it says that I'm muted.
think. Okay, so we put the video on.
Let's see.
What if you go down to the little one in the corner? On the right-hand side, the little speaker button.
I have a lead button. I'm muted here.
Okay, so on your regular computer, well, let's try this. That's not working.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. So, did Mark want us to go through the business meeting before he spoke? Because I first just assumed take it straight in order.
Yeah, I think we can do it. Or he didn't say anything about changing the order.
Okay. Okay.
So, and I know he's not going to stay for the one.
Okay.
Let me know when I should start recording and I'll hit that button.
Okay. And I'm going to start in. Oh, we're at 6:31 on here, so the clock's off. So I'm going to start recording. Let's see, how many do we have here? Good evening, everyone. The February 11th, 2021 Whatcom County Planning Commission meeting is called to order. I will read the roll. Let me lay my hands on it first. Okay. Robert Bartell.
Here.
Kelvin Barton, that's myself. I'm here. Atul Dasmani.
Here.
Jim Hansen.
Here.
Stephen Jackson.
Here.
Kimberly Lund, I understand will not be here. John Mayberry.
Here.
Natalie McClendon.
Here.
Dominic Masseri.
Here.
Hey, thank you. Please join me at this time for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
Justice for all.
So now it's time for department update. Mark Personius, would you give us the department update?
Hi, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Happy Thursday. I've got a few things to go over with you tonight, just on the department update. First off, come February 1st, the state Building Code Council adopted a new energy code that went into effect. And it basically will have the effect of requiring increased energy efficiency measures for new construction, new single-family residential and multifamily residential construction. And so there was quite a bit of concern on the behalf of the builders and the contractors about that in relation to affordable housing and how that might increase the cost of housing, of new construction. And so there was quite a bit of concern about trying to get some of their projects and new single-family building permits vested to the existing code, what is now the old code, prior to February 1st. So I just want to give you a little background on that we worked on developing a policy to allow vesting on a temporary basis in January for a lot of those permits, so they could get in and hopefully get a little bit of discourage a little bit of increased housing construction costs. The net result of that was that we had 162 single-family permit intakes in the month of January. That is normally the number of single-family intakes we get in 5 months. We would normally get that in a normal year. We'd get that amount of applications by May. And so we got that number in 30 days or 31 days. So we created quite a bit of work for ourselves to let folks in, and now have a pretty good backlog of those permits. But our customers were pretty happy about that to be able to get in, and hopefully at least there's 162 units that'll be a little bit more affordable than those that now have to meet the new energy code. So I just wanted to let you know that kind of on the permitting side of the house. Now talking about affordable housing in general, kind of on the long range side of things, the county executive and the mayors have been talking for a little bit about things they can do to work on affordable housing at the countywide level on a collaborative basis. And we've to sort of talk about the challenges and the barriers we face on affordable housing and how to address that, rather than every jurisdiction, all 7 cities in the county trying to do things piecemeal on their own. So what we've proposed is a affordable housing action plan that the county would be willing to facilitate, but all the jurisdictions, all 7 cities and the county would be involved in. And we have moved forward with that. We've prepared a draft scope of work we're going to share with the city planners group. The county and the city planners meet on a monthly basis. And so with the blessing of the executive, we're going to start that process, get that scope of work sort of vetted, bring it back to the mayors and the executive for their blessing, come up with a cost sharing arrangement similar to how we would have paid for the EIS for the comp plan update, where we all chip in and share on the cost and then hire a consultant to do that work. And that would specifically address particular affordable housing needs, where the shortfall is for particular household income groups, very low, moderate, so forth. Try to assess how many units we have that meets those targets, and what the shortfall is in terms of the supply, and then look at the strategies that jurisdictions might use, that do use currently and could use that we're not using, to help fulfill those gaps. So I just want to let you know that is starting up. It's a bit nascent at the moment, but as I said, I expect we're going to get some movement on that here in the next couple of months or so. So ultimately, you guys would see some of the recommendations that would come out of that plan in terms of any particular or potential code changes or account plan changes. Also on the affordable housing side, Cliff is working with current planning staff on developing some code changes that we could do right now to facilitate additional accommodation of tiny homes. There were some changes at the state legislature to encourage more tiny homes. And so we'll be developing some language in Title 20, the zoning code, and Title 21, the subdivision code, that'll help facilitate a little bit more of that development, and also provide some more affordable housing types in the county. And then the third leg of that is that Matt will be working on temporary homeless facilities regulations later this year. Those will come to you guys and then go to council. And that is specifically aimed at temporary facilities, homeless shelters, or tiny home villages that would be specifically for homeless populations. So those are all the things that are sort of in play that the department's working on in terms of affordable housing and homelessness right now. The other issue, I think you guys, I forwarded a email to you guys this afternoon about I know you've been getting a lot of comments about a marijuana processing facility up in Kendall, in the Kendall area along Mount Baker Highway. That is in a permitting review process right now. You guys don't have a role in that. Council doesn't have a role in that. That's strictly a administrative permit review process. But there's very interested neighbors that have been sending a lot of comments both to you guys and to the council. So I had sent a message to council, and I sent that to you guys this afternoon as well, to kind of just give you background on what that process is. So we're engaged with that applicant, and we're engaged with the neighbors about that. And we will definitely reflect their concerns as we go through the process. The last thing I have for you guys is just a note that Tammy indicated today that she is all caught up on the Planning Commission meeting minutes for the last 2 years. And I think, thank you. First of all, thank you, Tammy. And I think she's hoping to get that into the next, I think the rest of those minutes would be in the packet for your next meeting. That's what I've got for you guys, unless you guys have any questions for me.
I believe Commissioner McClendon has a question for you.
Yeah, on the new energy code and those 100-some single family housing applications. So will there be any notification to buyers that these new residences going on the market in the coming year are based on the old code?
Those plans are available and recorded in our archive. So new buyers can certainly access those and be aware of those, and we can certainly make the agents aware of those.
So it's sort of buyer beware.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Desmani.
Sorry, I have a question about the, it seems like this is, Mark, a little bit new that we're going to be looking at, the Planning Commission is going to be looking at a lot of building related codes. I could be wrong, but I don't recall us looking at a lot of that over the last several years. And is that because we're talking about significant changes in that regard, and that's why the Planning Commission is going to be involved? Or is there other reasons?
You guys, the Planning Commission isn't involved in the building code per se, because it's not considered a land use control, which is your statutory authority. But affordable housing in general, when it comes to zoning code or subdivision code or related codes that have something to do, or the intent is regarding affordable housing, be it comp plan policies or incentives or things like that, then you guys, yes, you guys would be and will be involved in those.
Because it's a new thing, I'd just like to ask staff that maybe to give the commission a little bit of orientation before we do start digesting that, recognizing the fact that it's the kind of thing that we haven't done much of in the past.
Yep.
And that, we may be a little bit needing a little bit of input and education on the subject before we get going.
Absolutely. That's a great comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Commissioner Hanson, go ahead.
Yes, Mark. I like to commend you and the county on these task force that are being set up. But one thing I'd like to ask is, what are you doing to dispel a rhetorical confusion that somehow equivocates lowering the cost of construction through mitigation, streamlining mitigations and permits, somehow equivocating that to producing housing that's affordable for middle and lower income people, since the two aren't really linked. But by using that term, you create the illusion that there's a direct linkage.
Yeah, it's always a challenge, Jim. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle when it comes to housing and affordability. In general, permitting fees, we don't consider to be a huge part of that, but that's always gets some attention and gets some focus and gets some concern. The factors that have led to the pretty significant increases in housing values here and certainly elsewhere in the rest of the country and the rest of the state and the rest of the region have much more to do with global and national economic conditions, wages, and all sorts of other things than they do necessarily with local conditions or permitting timelines or things like that. So, and we have a lot of state mandated requirements on the permitting side that we just don't have a lot of wiggle room on, and we've also got, from a permitting standpoint, clear direction from the county executives and the county council is that we're a fee-for-service agency. So rather than have those costs for permitting spread around the entire population of the county, that they should be based on those folks that are actually applying for permits. They should pay for those services. So those are kind of major factors that go into our permitting fees, for example. And so we're looking at, and we always have to justify those, and we do every budget cycle. Every 2 years we go back, we compare ourselves with all the other counties, similar counties in terms of size, and what their fees are. We have to justify what our charges are. And the more regulations that we have, of course, the more work we have to do, or different work we have to do. And so that's always a challenge. But I think this Affordable Housing Action Plan is kind of going to be looking at some other options too. They're going to be looking at financing things. Are there other incentives we could be doing, governments could be doing, cities and counties could be doing, that would ease up or more affordable housing, and how might we do that? So the intent is to have, just have that table open and have that conversation open so everybody gets their voices heard on that.
Thank you, Mark. So now is the time for open session for public comment. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Desmani for giving me a heads up on the issue that we've been reading about this past week. This is an open session for public comment for things that are not on the agenda. So we are glad to have you speak. To raise your hand if you're joining us by phone, it takes *9. And if you're called on to speak, you can press *6 to unmute. And I think I have that accurate. Are there any of the attendees that would like to address the Planning Commission this evening? I see that we have 8 of you attending, and you are welcome to speak. And again, you want to press *9 to let us know that you'd like to speak. And I am not seeing any, there we are. I'm not sure which, it says it's Holly. And so there you go, Holly Kuhn. So tell us who you are, where you're from, and you have 3 minutes to speak to us. Go ahead.
Hi, Commissioner Barton. I actually raised my hand, but there's several other people also wanting to speak, and I can make my comments a lot shorter potentially if I can speak after them. I don't want to repeat.
Okay,
Can we-
well, we will just hold on to you then. So Wendy Harris, go ahead. She's done.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, I guess $1 late and a minute short, whatever the saying is, but what I'm looking at is very disturbing to me. I really think that we need to make sure we have baseline standards, and we don't. And I was looking at that consultant report, and there's a lot of conclusionary statements in there, but I don't see the work that backs any of that up, and that concerns me. And we need to know, particularly with biodiversity, because that's what really drives healthy ecosystems. We need to know what native species and plants are present, which means we need somebody to go out and actually do a field review and identify the species that are there, and then get some sense of what times of the year they're there and their size. And then from there, that establishes a baseline, and we follow it and monitor it to determine if populations are getting bigger or smaller, so we know if we're meeting no net loss. Right now, we have no way of knowing if we're meeting no net loss standards, and that just makes a joke of all of this. And then when you're dealing with shorelines of statewide significance, the standards are even higher than that. And some of the things I'm seeing are troubling, like allowing viewing to come into more than 25% of the buffer of wetlands. I mean, the wetland buffers are to protect wildlife, since that saving wildlife is a more important goal than allowing people to see wildlife. And that just reflects really messed up priorities. And I'm going to have to take more time to look at this in depth, but I would like to leave you with the concept that buffers they're a part and parcel of keeping a critical area alive. And we have this idea there's something superfluous. The critical area, the buffer is the amount of space necessary to protect the critical area from the activities that are going on with humans outside of here. And it's an intensity of use impact. And in theory, it shouldn't just be 20 feet or 50 feet. It depends on the species that's present and the amount of activity that's surrounding it. So our whole approach to this is not correct. And
Seconds.
okay, I'll just conclude here, but and I am very upset by what I heard Mr. Personius say. I just want to comment on that. I don't think it should be a goal to squeeze people in under standards that are clearly inadequate. They wouldn't be changing the energy standards if the ones we had were adequate. And, it's not about helping people build cheap houses as it is helping everybody live in a healthy community. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mayberry, did you have a question for one of the panelists?
No, I just wanted to point out that and I think most of them have figured it out, but the people that are using Zoom, they need to raise their hand as opposed to hitting *9. Just wanted to make sure they all knew that.
Okay, thank you. So Eliza Steele, you are welcome to talk.
Okay, hi. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to introduce myself as Eliza Steele, a resident of Whatcom County and owner of 633 Mount Baker Highway in Deming, Washington. My husband and I were happy to purchase this dream farm in this pristine rural area to begin a new career of growing food and building a demonstration farm of regenerative agriculture and building practices in order to provide a space where people would be able to come and learn. One of our goals is to bring in new jobs and business to help revive the agricultural sector in the valley in a sustainable way. We were aware of the marijuana grow across the street and were comfortable with it being just a growing operation at the legal capacity it is at, which is a Tier 3. Upon hearing of an administrative use permit being proposed to expand the operation, we started to look into the project more, since we have experience as building designers and permit consultants in King County for 10 years. Seeing the level of the project proposed, we didn't worry too much and trusted that the planning department would be having extensive reviews done in collaboration with the institutions to make sure the environment and adjacent community were protected. I was absolutely and utterly shocked when it was revealed how little oversight was happening, requesting input from the other institutions, including Department of Ecology and Fish and Wildlife and others. From my past experience, a SEPA review would have been required for the water usage, immense impervious surface, and land disturbing activity that has been done. After reviewing the outdoor marijuana codes, it was revealed that the current codes are not protective enough for the adjacent community and the environment. Looking into this matter further, it has also become apparent that this is happening to citizens in other locations around Whatcom County as well. In connecting with Ferndale resident Blake Hanasek, whom told me about what he has been going through for the last 3 years, I again was deeply shocked by the negligence of the Whatcom Planning Department in enforcing what was required for the initial approval of the permit for the large Tier 3 marijuana grow operation. The main issues that have not been enforced is light pollution at night from the greenhouses, water usage, and incredibly strong odor that come from the facility when the greenhouses need to be opened in the heat. The planning department had in-person meetings with the community about this, and nothing has been done still to this day. What he is experiencing is what happens when a large-scale corporation is allowed to come in and build an industrial-sized complex for product growing and production in rural residential areas. This is already happening with the Tier 3 grow across the street from us, since there is currently no enforcement happening with current code violations, building without permits, and the company is growing way over their legal limits. How can there be an expectation of the ordinance being abided by if it's already not happening in another area of the county? With the neighboring Tier 3 marijuana facility overgrowing their legal limit, it is estimated that they are using 30,000 gallons per day during the warmest months when they're only allowed 5,000. This is going to be pulling immense amounts of water from the water table and could be detrimental to our operations as well.
Eliza, your time is up, and I would love to hear the rest of what you have to say, but we have a 3-minute, and so I need to go on to the next person, and I want to thank you for speaking to us tonight.
Can I just state why I'm saying all this? With all of this information, thus far, it has been revealed that Whatcom County codes are really inadequate to regulate these large grows. And it's asking of an emergency moratorium be requested. And so that there's time to actually figure out what kind of codes need to come into place to be able to regulate these properly, and maybe perhaps go in other zoning areas, since other counties across the state have all done this, and Whatcom County is actually behind on this. And that's why I'm bringing it to the Planning Commission, since this is part of what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Baker, I believe it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi there. My name is Todd Baker, and thank you for letting us speak. I have the same topic. It's about the marijuana farm in Kendall area, but it's also about marijuana farms in general. I definitely think we need more county oversight, more DOE oversight, more rules and regulations limiting the size of these farms. I think that they're considered agriculture in this county, and I don't think, the rest of the state, I don't believe recognizes them as agriculture. They don't need ground, they just need space. All these plants are grown in pots. All this production and all that kind of stuff can happen in warehouses. It can happen in an industrial area instead of out in a rural, scenic byway where families live. You're within 3,000 or 5,000 feet of the school. There's just a whole bunch of issues, and I don't think anybody's really taken the time to sit down and look at them. So I really wish that more planning would go into looking at these permits, and it seems to be that the people just build and do whatever they feel like doing and then ask for forgiveness later. And it seems like it's too late. So I also asked for a moratorium like other counties have done. This farm in particular is in the floodplain in the Nooksack recharge area. It's on Kendall Creek. There's going to be a lot of pesticides and fertilizers, and really a lot of the compliance is self-compliance. And I don't believe that it should be left up to the owner of the facility to self-police. And they've kind of shown by example that they're not really ready to do that. So I wish the Planning Commission would look at it and maybe think about a moratorium, and everybody needs more time to think about it and talk about it. And I don't think it belongs in a small rural community. And that's what I've got. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. David, I can't see the last name right now, but go ahead. Tell us your name and where you're from.
David Haggith, can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay. So we sold our farm to Eliza, who was the first person talking to you, or second, just a bit ago. And during the course of our sale this last summer, this other farm was bought next door to us. And while they were waiting for their financing, the other farm started its pot operations. And part of my concern is the communication in that process. We were sent sometime during that time when their financing was working through information that they were going to, the new neighbors were going to build a fence. Didn't even say a fence, but I just surmised that based on the huge area covered, but the small amount of square footage of the actual footprint of the structure. I don't recall it saying anything about growing marijuana. Maybe it did, and I've forgotten that or missed that. But all of a sudden, we've got 5 acres of marijuana growing right next door to us. I sent an aerial photo I took last summer. I went up on top of Sumas Mountain and took a photo down there, and I sent that to Mr. Personius just a little while ago, and Mr. Sullivan and Paul Sidhu, and they might not have seen it yet. But I scaled it there to our farm, drew an oval, shows the scale of the farm, and then said what the area is. And you can just see by looking at it, it's got to be about 4 to 5 acres that's solid plants, no space in between them. And I'm wondering how you go from nothing to 5 acres of open growing marijuana that stinks in a 1 mile radius. And I don't recall even having gotten a word originally of a pot farm. If I did, it certainly seems to me like it's a lot bigger than other grow operations I see. And I wonder, is that even permitted? The smell is obnoxious and it lasts for months on end. And my concern is we've sold the farm. We'd like to buy another place out in the county that's smaller. And how do I know that something isn't going to go in that's just as devastating as that is? Because the smell lasts for months on end, and I hate the smell. So it actually makes me hate where I'm living. So I'm really concerned that I'll buy another property in the county and all of a sudden this skunk farm will go in next to it.
Thank you, David. Holly Kuhn, you had asked to wait to talk till after everyone else has spoken. So Holly, go ahead.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Holly Kuhn and I live at 7537 Wheeler Road, about 3/4 of a mile as a crow flies from the marijuana farm that folks in front of me have been talking about. But I want to start being really clear that those of us that are speaking to you tonight actually are here to ask the Planning Commission to do something that is the Planning Commission's job, not an enforcement job, and that is to put in place an emergency moratorium on these kinds of operations in Whatcom County until Whatcom County can sort of catch up with the rest of the counties around us. So I just want to read you a couple of experiences and wording from counties around us. So Skagit County did place an emergency moratorium, a 6-month moratorium. And as a result of that moratorium in their investigation, they changed their marijuana production codes. And I want to read this. It says, this is Skagit County next to us. Marijuana production and processing facilities are incompatible with the rural landscape and rural residential communities, including the rural resource zone, which frequently appears near rural residential zones. Marijuana growing and processing products, potentially significant odors. The potential impacts in marijuana facilities should be balanced against the likelihood of those impacts, and known impacts should be mitigated through a special use process. Chelan County also had an emergency moratorium, and this is from their current code. No part of this chapter is intended to reflect cannabis as constituting an agricultural product. It is not an agricultural product, and any provisions of this code or any other adopted regulations with regard to agriculture, unless provided, do not apply to cannabis. The production and processing of cannabis has directly increased the quantity of citizen complaints and concerns of obnoxious odor, noise, bright lighting, increased traffic, and risk of crime associated with these businesses. The primary distinction between impacts from the production and processing of cannabis and other businesses is a function of the intensity and duration of those impacts. For example, the odor from maturing cannabis can linger for weeks or longer. For weeks or longer. And the increased potential of negative impacts of cannabis production and processing on neighboring properties, as well as the continued characterization of marijuana as a Schedule I drug. San Juan County, another adjoining county, placed a moratorium, and followed by changes to their code to completely prohibit Tier 3 grows. They allow only Tier 1 and Tier 2, and only in industrial zoned areas. And I might add, in San Juan County, their entire process to prohibit Tier 3 grows anywhere in the county was a direct result of dealing with the operator that we're dealing with in our neighborhood now. So, and I'll send you a link to that, to those articles. So again, we're here to ask for an emergency moratorium. Enforcement is not occurring. The picture that you have in front of you of the amount of marijuana that was grown on that farm is 6 times what the state allows for a Tier 3 grow. Simple math shows that that's about 6 times the allowed water use of 5,000 gallons a day to grow plants outside like that. So, I mean, we don't have somebody who's self-monitoring, and the county is not monitoring. Mark Personia said the county's doing their job. The county is not doing their job in this operation. So we would really like to ask the Planning Commission to place a moratorium.
Holly, I need to interrupt because you're past your time, but Commissioner Mayberry, did you have a question or a comment for them?
Yeah, I was just curious. A moratorium on what? It'd be nice to have some language from the other counties, specifically laying out what that moratorium would affect.
I have some language here that I can send to you from San Juan and Skagit County, their moratorium language, if you want me to do that. The moratorium placed a complete moratorium on any marijuana growing or production operations for 6 months, and then in a couple of counties they extended them further for another 6 months.
So would that completely stop their operations, or would it stop the expansion of their operations?
I'd have to look at it again, Commissioner Mayberry. I'm sorry. I'm not an expert on this. I'm coming up to speed really quickly, but I'm not there yet. But I can send you some of the links if you want, or probably just a quick Google search would show you what the moratorium language was. But the main point, the reason for a moratorium is because clearly Whatcom County is kind of getting caught on their back feet with this. And we've got people from other places coming in and taking advantage of that. And it has a huge impact on our rural character and on the livelihood and the lifestyle of the people that live here. You know, I think it really deserves.
Holly, let me interrupt here. We have a couple more commissioners who would like to ask you questions, and then we have a 3-minute time limit, and many appear to be interested in what you have to say, but emailing it, if you can email it to the Planning Commission coordinator, or if you need, it's probably the best place. You could send it to Mark Personius, but Planning Commission coordinator is Tammy. That'd be a great place to send it. But Commissioner Hanson, did you have a question?
Yeah, this is procedural. Maybe it's for you. Do we have a role that would allow us to initiate ordinances or moratoriums, or do we just review those that are given to us by county council?
So I'll try and answer that. I'm not sure I have the exact answer, Commissioner Hanson, but I know that in the past we have added things to our agenda and carried them forward, such as Commissioner McClendon's public participation plan that we passed on to County Council. So we have some latitude there. I'm sure that there are people brighter than me on staff that will be able to tell us exactly what we can do. Thank you. Commissioner McClendon.
I have a quick question for Holly. Hi, Holly. I met you before. When were these moratoriums in San Juan and Skagit done? So are those recent?
Fairly recent, within the last couple of years. Let me pull them up. Like I said, I'm coming up to speed really quickly here as I realize, as I just get more of a scope of kind of what's happening in the county. So hold on just a second. Let me look.
I asked because
Yeah.
I was on the planning commission when we did the original code changes when the marijuana law went into effect.
Okay, here's San Juan County. This is an article dated September 6th of 2020, and it said the moratorium had just been lifted and it had been in place for a year and a half. That was the one that was directly in response to the guy that we're dealing with down the road. I'm looking at Skagit. Here's the moratorium language. Let's see if there's a date at the top of this. I have an ordinance number. I do not. Oh, wait, they probably signed it. Let me look at the date at the bottom. 2015 in Skagit County.
Yeah, that sounds like it's more likely when the law went into effect. The original, because we, Mr. Pisonius could correct me on this, but as I recall, we had, we had to create the code to accommodate the new law. We didn't just willy-nilly let people apply for stuff.
Commissioner McClendon, though, it's pretty clear in the WAC that the state leaves it to the counties to place code requirements on these operations.
Well, I understand that. I'm just saying.
Just wanted to.
I mean, when we first were faced with the new marijuana rules of growing rules, we had to create code to address those potential operations.
Well,
I was curious about the timing because, I mean, none of us at that time knew what we were just kind of anticipating as best we could what the issues would be.
Right. And to be fair to you, it looks like all of these other counties have gone through this same process. They're just in front of us, right? That it became an issue, and then there was a moratorium, and then they reviewed their codes, and not a single one of them considers it agricultural anymore. And most of them don't allow it in rural residential areas, tier 3 grow operations anymore. But it had to go through this same process, right? So there's a concern raised, somebody came in, pushed the boundaries, and then this was the process. So it's Whatcom's turn.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if this is the right time to do it, but can we put that on the agenda for our next meeting?
We probably can. Why don't you can hold on to that and bring it up a little bit later. We have one more panelist who would like to speak, and maybe we can do it as soon as we hit our old business, new business, or our workshop, and bring it up as new business. Is everybody okay with us bringing that up just before our workshop? Commissioners, thumbs up.
Before?
Just before we go into our workshop for the evening, just to bring up if we should put it on our agenda.
Okay, sure.
No, I don't wanna place it too late, but if we need to put it at the end, we could. I just thought it might not take that long to add it to our agenda. Commissioner, Desmani.
Thank you. So I believe I see there's one more person on the phone here who wants to comment, make public comment. But I also just wanted to be able to summarize the conversation that I've had. But I just noticed that there was one more public comment. I'd like to wait until after that public comment to make my comment.
We have someone in, I think their number ends in 1999. I'm sorry, 199. Could you identify yourself and tell us where you're from?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
We sure can.
Okay, my name is Rainbow Medicine Walker. I live in Kendall, and some of the things I wanted to talk about have already been addressed. I'm the one who sent the Google Earth image showing the large overgrow in my neighborhood. And so what I'd like to address is the water usage concern, because the scale of this overgrow, which I've been told by several agencies is not that uncommon, is using so much more water than is legally allowed by the Department of Ecology, that if Whatcom County cannot regulate these kinds of operations that are overusing water, then I fear that our credibility in the upcoming water adjudication hearings will potentially be compromised. Not to mention credibility with the very communities which county government serves. We need an emergency moratorium on any more marijuana producer processor permits until this lack of oversight, water overusage, overgrowth, various problems with these large growths can be examined and these issues can be addressed, because the current codes do not protect our precious landscape. They don't protect our quality of life or the safety of our communities. Our marijuana codes desperately need to be upgraded to address these serious problems. And our local Department of Ecology water master sent an email to county planning with very specific concerns regarding water usage limits with both the current Saturn Group Vented 2 marijuana operation in my neighborhood and its proposed expansion. And this letter was sent even before the Google Earth image became available to illustrate the actual overgrow of this operation. However, these concerns were not addressed in the notice of additional requirements recently sent to Vented 2 regarding this permit application for that proposed expansion. And I do not know why these serious water concerns were not addressed. I have forwarded the water master's comment to the Planning Commission. There are serious public safety concerns with Vented 2's marijuana operation. Gun threats, bullying, not allowing the public to stop and read the public notice sign posted on the property for this expansion, people being told that they have to move along, they can't stop and read the sign, an individual sitting on his truck with a rifle prominently displayed when people stop to read the public notice sign. I mean, I could go on. Some of these are verified. People have filed complaints. Some of them are not. But it's extremely disturbing on multiple levels, the effect this operation has had in our community. And frankly, the thought that they could keep expanding it's horrifying, because these issues are already, in my opinion, and that of many others, quite out of control. I spoke with Northwest Clean Air Agency about the odor pollution, which also reaches down to the Kendall Elementary School into the playground. And we are a drug-prone community. It's unconscionable that these kids should be exposed to, a controlled narcotic substance odor while they're out playing. And then that, makes them start talking about it, and they get all excited about it. When I spoke with Northwest Clean Air Agency, they told me that they had told both Skagit and Whatcom County officials it was going to be up to the counties to regulate odor pollution, that they don't have the resources to do that.
I need to interrupt because your 3 minutes have expired. We have one person filling in as staff, used to be here full-time with Whatcom County, is now moving to San Juan County. Ryan, did you want to comment?
If Mark can give me the thumbs up to make a small comment about the difference between hemp and cannabis growing operations. If it's okay, Mark. Okay, so I just want to let the callers and planning commission know that if the grower is growing a crop that has less than 0.3% THC, it's considered hemp. Hemp itself is considered an agricultural product and is recognized by the Department of Ag as an ag use and a ag product. If it's over that THC content, it's regulated as cannabis, which is a commercial use. So I just wanted to let everybody know that there's a fine distinction between that.
It is a cannabis grow.
So yeah, well, I just want to make sure that when you guys are talking about putting a moratorium, that you'll be putting a moratorium on the cannabis production, which would not affect any ag producers of hemp products.
All right, thank you, Ryan. And the attendees, I know there was one more that wished to speak that had already spoken for 3 minutes earlier, so I was not could not let you speak again. And I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Commissioner Desmani, for bringing it to our attention and recommending for the attendees to speak to us. So now is the time for commissioner comments. Commissioner comments, Commissioner Desmani.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I wasn't expecting this much of a turnout, so I apologize to my colleagues. I would have given more clarification if I knew that, but they're certainly welcome to make public comment. I'm not in any way discouraging that. I just wasn't expecting as many comments to come in. I did have the benefit of a little bit of time because I started hearing about these complaints about a week ago. Actually, and then I've made a couple of attempts to reach out to Tyler Bird, whose district this is on the county council. I have not heard back from him. Some of you may know that our county executive is currently on medical leave. He's fine, but I haven't bugged him. But what I see here is two issues. One is that having to do with enforcement, that this community has decided, that our neighbors of that business have basically decided that this person is a bad actor, and that's in any kind of a project, an operator can be considered a bad actor by neighbors, and so that's there's enforcement action related items that need to be addressed. Some of them fall on the Planning Commission. Some of them are Planning and Development Services. Some of them fall on state level authorities like ecology, and some of them may even apply to federal authorities. And then there's a second issue, which is more the bailiwick of the Planning Commission, which is to give advice to the county council about potential moratorium and code changes. So what I'd like to suggest as follow-up to these comments is that a few of us commissioners have a meeting with the PDS, the appropriate person at PDS, to figure out how we address this issue and what kind of recommendations we make, how we put it on our agenda, or if we put it on our agenda, the council docket and all of that. So I'd like to suggest that that's the follow-up we take on this. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay, so let's move on to approval of minutes.
Calvin,
Yes, go ahead.
my raised hand disappeared.
Okay, oh, then, yeah, I'm sorry, and I did not see it there, but Commissioner McGlennon, please go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't have any button to raise my hand.
Oh, let me change something here. Try now.
There we go. Okay. I just wanted to say, I appreciate Commissioner Desmani's clarification on what needs to be done. And I just want to make a point. We need to distinguish between whether or not, are the rules we have in place adequate and appropriate and they're not being followed, or are the rules we have in place not adequate and appropriate and we need to adjust those? I think that's what Deshmani said, but I just wanted to say it again.
All right, thank you, Commissioner McClendon. All right, now let's go ahead. I don't see any other hands. Let's go to approval of minutes, January 28th. So January 28th of this year. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes of January 28th.
Second.
Any discussion on it? Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
All right. Bartel,
Abstain.
Desmani,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Mayberry,
Yes.
McClendon,
Yes.
Mosseri,
Yes.
Barton.
Yes.
Passes 7 with 1 abstaining.
And now July 9th, 2020.
I move to approve.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? Any corrections? Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Desmani,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Mayberry,
Yes.
McClendon,
Yes.
Mosseri,
Yes.
Barton.
Yes.
That passes 8-0.
And so now is the time for our annual business meeting. And the first point up is election of chair and vice chair. Commissioner Mayberry.
I'd like to renominate Commissioner Barton for chair and Commissioner Lund for vice chair, unless we'd rather do them separately. I think they both did great. Have done great this past year, allowing equal time for both sides of the arguments, and I'd like to see it continue.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? Commissioner Desmani.
I'm not making a nomination. I thought somebody should say something besides just John. So yeah, I think it's a great, I think you've done a great job, Calvin, and our team is working just great, so.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Commissioner Mayberry.
Does Commissioner Lund have to be here to accept her nomination? I know I have been appointed to many things while I have not been present, and sometimes that's a surprise.
I do not believe she has to be here.
Perfect.
So I think what we have is we have a motion and we have, appears we have no other nominations. So Tammy, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Desmani,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Jackson,
Wholeheartedly, yes.
Mayberry,
Yes.
McClendon,
Yes.
Mosseri,
Yes.
Barton.
Yes.
Okay, that carries 8-0.
And thank you, commissioners, for all the support you give me, and thank you for your vote of confidence. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Calvin.
So now we talked about a little bit of discussion on the attendees' concerns about our marijuana regulations. And we talked about whether we should recommend a moratorium or if we should recommend we send it on to council to look at it further. I'm not trying to take a position. I don't have one. But
Gilman,
I'm interested. So
we need to adopt the business rules.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Point of order. Thank you. Review of business rules, and Tammy's going to explain a little bit of what she said she made some corrections or changes, and I think some of those reflect what we did just before we quit meeting in person last year. So she tried to reflect the changes we voted on. So
Okay, well, the changes were actually quite small. I can bring them up on the screen if you need to, but if you have them in front of you, that's fine. On the first page, it was just, I'm pretty sure it was just a typo, the word usually incident to such office, and I believe it was supposed to be incidental. On the second page, and tell me if I'm moving too fast, they're very small changes. Under number 4, meetings, in the first line of the paragraph, instead of designated, I changed it to affirmed, which I hope we can do tonight, because the meetings have been set for Thursday nights at 6:30 since forever. And in all the review I did of even the meeting last year, they were not redesignated. So if we could, at the end of the business meeting portion of this, or business rules, just reaffirm that that is something that we would like to continue. And of course, that is open for discussion if a majority don't want that time. The next one was just, the next ones were just some capital letters that were added to commission when it was used as a proper noun. And then in number 10 was a very small change. I just, A and B, changed it to a more active verb. There's a couple of places where I added some commas. I added the word the to make a sentence make sense in 10E number 2. And then there's a place where I just changed a written 5 to a digital 5, a numeric 5, to coincide with all of the other numbers within the document that were in numeric form. So very, very small changes. And then I just wanted to make a comment that due to COVID of last year, I believe that's why I do not have a signed copy of the 2020 business rules, that I was not able to distribute a signed copy to you. I'm almost positive that's why. So I just wanted to make note of that. And then ask if you had any other concerns, comments, or changes that you would recommend. Okay, looks like we have a couple of commissioners.
Commissioner Hanson.
I am not in favor of the change to 5 minutes for comments.
Okay.
I've always believed that if you couldn't say something in 3 minutes, it wasn't worth saying. And I looked it up tonight, and Lincoln's Gettysburg Address lasted somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes.
Just to clarify, that was already in the rules. I just changed it from the written out 5 to the number 5. I didn't actually add that sentence.
I see. So then I would need to make a motion to amend it from 5 to 3 then. Could I make that motion?
Yes, you could.
I'd like to make that motion. In both places where it's highlighted as 5, I'd like to see it say 3.
I'll second that.
All right. Commissioner McClendon.
You're muted.
Can you unmute her?
Thought I ended it. This section is about holding public hearings, and it's all at the discretion of the chair. And we don't even follow half of this anyway, currently. It's not about the amount of time we give for the open session for public comment. I don't think it's important one way or another. Because like I said, it's all at the discretion of the chair, how we go about conducting. I mean, if you'll read this, it's a suggestion of a process for a public hearing. So I don't think it matters. That's all I want to say.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, I was just curious exactly where we're looking here. This isn't, maybe Natalie or Commissioner McClendon answered that for me. So this has nothing to do with the open session comments.
It's number 10 at the top of page 4 is the section, and the edit for the number of minutes is at the top of page 5.
Okay.
Commissioner Hanson.
Well, having been at some of these public hearings that last 5 hours, I think it would be prudent to have a 3-minute limit on testimony. That is, as distinct from presentations that we are soliciting or approving.
I'll answer that for you, Commissioner Hanson, is that when we get those real long ones, we have the discretion to limit it, and we've tended to limit them to 3. But when there's some of the smaller topics, for instance, someone talking about one of the converting to forest land, and we tend to let them talk a little bit longer. But when we get the big ones, we tend to limit them. Commissioner McClendon.
So a year ago, when we last looked at this, I brought up this whole process of under number 10, the procedure for hearings, and had suggested another way, some optional ways in which we could handle large crowds. I mean, obviously this was an idea that would involve in-person situations. I'm prepared to just adopt this as is, but with the understanding that when we get to a point where we're going to hold a hearing that is of high interest and we should expect a large number of people, that we will take the time to really think about how to run a hearing so that it's fair to all the participants. They don't have to show up 2 hours early to get on the list or wait till 11 o'clock at night to speak, or at least have some fair way of allocating those slots. But yeah, I'm not in a position tonight to discuss my ideas that I had a year ago, because I wouldn't know where to look for my notes.
Those were incorporated into the minutes or into the rules as 10J, 1 through 6. They were approved at your meeting last year, and so
okay.
Yeah, they're there.
Well, I forgot about it. Okay, but the point is that we would have to decide as a body how we were gonna do it. Whether we go with my idea that's in J or the process that's laid out under, what is that, E? Well, yeah. Or the way we've been doing it, which is just a free-for-all. Everybody come up and sign up a list. But that's all I'm asking, is that we give that, we allow time in our agenda before we have the next big hearing to discuss actually how we want to do it. And I just need, yeah. I don't need a vote.
Commissioner Hanson.
Well, since there's a pretty uncomplicated motion on the, that's been made and seconded, could we just call the question and move on from it?
Yeah, we sure can. Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Bartel?
No.
Commissioner Deshmani?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson? Commissioner Jackson?
Apologize, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Mayberry?
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon?
No.
Commissioner Masseri?
Abstain.
And Commissioner Barton?
No.
Fails. 4 yeses, 3 nays, and 1 abstaining.
Commissioner Bartel.
I had an item on page 7, number 12B, and where I was going with this, more of a housekeeping type of item that might convey our goals and desire as a planning commission. And a couple of the items were to just solidify in writing that we are looking for the minutes to reflect the individual vote of each commissioner. And one other piece that I was thinking, the minutes should be prepared for approval, preferably by the next regular planning commission meeting and not more than 30 days after the meeting. You know, and I'm certainly understanding of the limited staff at PDS, and Mark and Tammy, of course, doing a great job, not saying anything bad, but just trying to, you know, convey that goal that we may have as a body to kind of document what we're trying to do or what our goals might be. I also remember that some of the citizens were commenting about the minutes not being done in a timely fashion, so it kind of reflect that intent as well. And, you know, of course, today we voted on something that was 6-8 months old, which gets a little hard to, you know, follow when they're that far behind. So I think it's really important that it's a goal and advisory statement, more of a should and not a shall, because I certainly understand, you know, resources and, you know, some of the meetings we were involved in were pretty complex and long to develop meeting minutes for. So that's my take on it. I'm not even ready and sure that it should be a motion. I'd just like to hear from other commissioners if that's something that would be appropriate to reflect here in our policies or procedures.
I'd second that if it becomes a motion.
Commissioner Hanson.
What's the motion?
Oh, excuse me, I didn't know if I heard right from Tammy what the tabulation was and the outcome was of the vote. I thought it sounded like 4-3 in favor, but she said it failed. And so maybe I didn't hear correctly. Could I hear that again?
Yeah, well, it was 4, 3, and 1 abstaining. So with 8 people being here, we would need 5 yeses to, would we not need 5?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, I think it would be better to split those requests up. So I'd be more inclined to vote for the one, shoot, I'm forgetting. What were the two things you wanted?
So reflect in the minutes the individual vote of each commissioner, and then the timeliness of the minutes, and of course make it more of a should rather than a firm shall, but just kind of reflect our goals.
Yeah, the timeliness in the minutes, I definitely support. I'm not sure I'd support the who voted for what. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I think it can be used to, I don't know, weaponize against people, but maybe I'm wrong. The other thing, now that we're caught up with the minutes, I would like to see a little more detail. It's kind of hard to understand our thought process with just the straight motions and then the votes on them. I completely understand the reasoning for getting caught up and having limited information in them, but it would be nice to see a little more of the discussion.
Commissioner McClendon.
My understanding is that we are required by state law, by the open meetings law, to have minutes, and there's some expectation of timeliness in that. I don't, and this 12B does say roll call votes, and anytime we are required to have roll call votes, then we are recording that in the minutes, the roll call votes. And so I don't know that we need a change to the business rules as they are.
If I could speak for a moment, to my recollection, because we are under COVID restraints, we have been doing, everything has been a roll call vote. But in the past, and your memory is correct, when we had all in favor say aye, and all opposed nay, those were recorded. It was just recorded the total, or whether it passed, failed. And but the roll call votes are all recorded, who it is. Just everything we're doing right now is a roll call vote due to the fact that we're having Zoom meetings. So I lean toward leaving it the way it is. When it's a legally required roll call vote, we record what the vote, who the votes were. And when we're allowed to get back to a voice vote, then I don't think we need to record that, who voted individually. So are there any more comments on this? I am not sure I'm going to have this correct. Commissioner Bartel, go ahead. Maybe you can help.
Yeah, so, I'm satisfied. I really just wanted to have more of the discussion about it. And, as long as they're caught up with the minutes and that continues, and if I certainly don't know the rules regarding the open meetings and such, and how quickly they have to be, the minutes have to be actually approved or whatever it is. So, I'm okay leaving things how they are.
Okay, so commissioners, my understanding was Commissioner Bartel thought this would be a good idea, but he also said that he wasn't specifically making a motion. And that Commissioner Masseri, if it was a motion, would be seconding. Do I have that correct then, that we don't have a motion, but we did end up with a discussion? Okay, all right. So thank you, Commissioner Bartel, for clarifying. So are there more comments on it or things to change? And then, sorry, let me, do we have a motion to approve the business meetings business meeting rules.
I'll make a motion to approve the business rules.
I will second that.
Did we have any motions that
As amended.
passed?
As amended.
Second.
As amended, thank you. All right, Tammy, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mayberry,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
Yes.
Commissioner Mosseri,
Yes.
Commissioner Barton.
Yes.
That carries 8-0.
Okay, and then, so we have other concerns or other comments? Okay, I am not seeing any hands up, so now let's move on to the question that we talked about quitting just before our workshop, and that was we've had several citizens addresses tonight. Commissioner Desmani.
So one other comment I just wanted to make to add to the previous comments is that, I would like to hear if there's other planning commissioners who've heard of similar issues in other parts of the county. I wanted to take that opportunity to make that request. If there is anybody who's got information about another project or another group of people concerned about this.
Right, Commissioner Mayberry.
Well, in response to O'Toole or Commissioner Desmani, sorry. No, I was just going to make a motion or ask staff, I'm not sure what's appropriate, that they look into the moratorium language that was used in Skagit and San Juan and provide us with something to look at and what that action, the practical consequences of what that action did, and yeah, bring it to us next meeting, put it on our agenda.
I would second that.
Okay. So is that a motion, Commissioner Mayberry?
Yes.
Okay, and do we have a second? And what I see is Director Personius isn't here. Oh, yes, he is. But Ryan Erickson raised his hand to speak. Go ahead, Ryan.
I just wanted to point out that Mark wanted to speak and he didn't raise his hand. So I just want to make sure that you saw him.
And he did show up on here just a moment ago. So Director Personius, can you comment on that?
Yep, we're happy to do that. We can put that, I know your next meeting, I think Ryan is going to be maybe a little delayed for that meeting in 2 weeks. And so what I would suggest is that what we could do is put that item first on your agenda. And we could gather that, whatever language we could find from those other jurisdictions, put those in the packet and perhaps give you a little, some potential language you guys could use. The Planning Commission wouldn't have to adopt the resolution or anything like that itself. That would be ultimately council action and a council decision, but a motion from the Planning Commission would be enough to simply, like you've done in the past, right? Just to forward on your recommendations onto the council. It could be a relatively short, simply worded item, and we could give you some model language for that in your next packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Mayberry.
It would be nice if there could be some outreach to the operations that would be affected as well. And I'm not too deeply into that world, so I don't know if any of you guys are.
So I would just add that just a moratorium, if one's enacted, what it does is it would prevent future applications, right? So those that are already in are vested and aren't stopped by any moratorium. They have a legal right to continue under the current law. But it would prevent future applications or new applications for those kinds of permits.
I guess it would still be nice to have them comment on how that affects their future plans.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, so that addresses one of the concerns that we heard. It doesn't address the concern if there's current facilities that are non-compliant. So I was just curious. Commissioner Desmani had suggested a path for maybe looking into that. I just want to make sure that doesn't get forgotten or see how that was going to be dealt with.
Commissioner Desmani.
So, I mean, this one's purely, this other pathway, I think, is purely political, because really the job of enforcement is the executive job and staff's job. And so sometimes, though, a community can put political pressure on the executive to focus more intensely on enforcement. And that's, I think, what we're looking at here. And, I don't want to be in, people in the community are concerned about something that, obviously, we write laws for good actors. All the laws we have are for people that take laws seriously. Unfortunately, when people don't take laws seriously and try to skirt laws, and I'm not saying this person is necessarily doing that, but the community certainly believes that about this person, then it's a difficult situation for staff, because staff is assuming everything's being done in good faith when they write codes. They're expecting people are answering the SEPA checklist in good faith. So it makes a complicated situation for staff, and community pressure, political pressure, is the only way to resolve that. And that's not the Planning Commission's job per se, but I do intend to follow up with this group and with the executive department to make sure that they do get all the options that they can to appeal for enforcement action.
Commissioner McClendon.
I wonder if it would be appropriate. It seems to me that this is like a regulatory tangle, because we're talking about water use, clean air ordinance issues, the actual land use regulations. I wonder if it would be appropriate if Mr. Personas could add to what he presents us to us, just a list of what he understands is who's in charge of regulating what. Does that make sense?
It does. And Commissioner McClendon, can you hold that thought just for a moment? Because we actually do have a motion on the table asking for this to be brought forward to our agenda next meeting. And I think it's, it appears that is going to happen, but let's go ahead and just vote on that motion. And then we'll come back to you, Commissioner McClendon, if you can restate that and we can talk about that. So Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson?
Yes.
Commissioner Mayberry?
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon?
Yes.
Commissioner Mosseri?
Yes.
Commissioner Barton?
Yes.
That carries 8-0.
Commissioner McClendon, go ahead and you had described it quite well, and then just if you can bring it forward again, and we'll ask Director Personius.
And so on the regulatory side for existing marijuana grow operations of whatever tier, what are the different regulatory bodies that regulate that? Because we've got water, we've got marijuana itself, we've got air quality, we've got land use, and there may be others. And who does what? Just so we can get kind of the lay of the land. I think it would probably be useful for other people as well to add that to your memo.
Yep, that's a great question. I think we've only got 3 business days to get your next packet out. So I don't know that we can get everything in a memo in the packet, but we can certainly have that information for you prior, for 2 weeks from tonight. We might bring it to the meeting or send it to you after the packet goes out. But
and Monday's a holiday, Mark, so you only have 2 business days.
Yeah, right. So actually, Cliff, you only have 2 business days to do that. So, but yeah, so I think what we might be able to do Tuesday is get you some model language, get you some background information. We can get you the existing code. The basic answers to your questions are there's 4 agencies involved, 2 state agencies, 1 regional agency, and the county. We have the regulations that were recommended by the Planning Commission. I think, Commissioner McClendon, you have 2015, 2016, I think, is when we did those. The Planning Commission made recommendations to the council. Council adopts the final recommendations, and then PDS implements implements those adopted regulations. So, and there was lots of conversations back in those days about, who wanted to do what, or how much control to have or not to have, or how much flexibility to have or not to have. So, and then ecology basically governs if you're on a permit exempt well, then ecology rules are in effect. If you're on a public water system, well, then it's whatever the agreement you have with the PUD or whoever the water association or the water district provider is. And air quality issues, odor issues, we have conversations with the Clean Air all the time about those issues. And who can, they're kind of the experts on air quality and odors, not PDS, but we have those conversations when those issues come up all the time. So there's lots of dialogue between the agencies on those kinds of things. So we'll do what we can and certainly give you the background on it.
Thank you. Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, it'd also be helpful if we could get some information on why marijuana operation or growing operations were not classified as ag, just before the meeting.
Well, that's state law. They're not ag.
Okay.
Yeah. We had conversations with the county council and with the planning commission when those regs were first adopted that we want to treat them like agriculture, but I use agriculture in not in the legal term. There's a legal definition of agriculture, and the state was pretty clear that marijuana is not agriculture because it's regulated differently than agriculture. But by it's growing of plants, so it has a lot of similarity to agriculture, but from a legal perspective, it's not technically agriculture.
Commissioner Hanson.
While it's clear that it's not our role as a planning commission to say look over the shoulder of other agencies that may have regulatory responsibilities that they aren't carrying out, we certainly could do that as citizens, like the Kendall Valley citizens, I hope, are doing. But next time the budget comes up, we should look at areas where we do have jurisdiction to enforce and try to ensure that there are adequate funds for monitoring and enforcement of those functions that we do govern.
Commissioner Jasmani.
And so just to add, Natalie talked, Commissioner McClendon talked about the importance of is getting some the different regulatory bodies that that pertain. I'll be curious when we have that meeting about what the related compliance obligations are, which is roughly the same question, but I just wanted to clarify. I would like also to understand what the compliance obligations of this operator or operators like this operator are, and what the enforcement, what are the different agencies that are responsible for enforcement as it relates to this particular kind of operation, a tier 3 operation.
Commissioner Mayberry.
I don't have to have, I mean, I don't want to put too much on staff here. I'm just saying those are the questions that I'll be asking when we do have this follow-on chat.
Go ahead, Commissioner Mayberry.
This is somewhat unrelated, but it just reminded me, was talking about foul odors. We had an issue a couple of years ago where a dead animal storage facility showed up next to one of our fields and surrounded by houses. And it was one of the grossest things I think I've ever had to deal with. And I believe some of the neighbors got together, went to the county, and thought that they had to been doing something wrong, but there was no code, I guess, restricting or at least mitigating the smell coming out of that. And I was wondering if this maybe could be an opportunity to add that as well. It doesn't have to be this next meeting, but I think that we do need some kind of requirements, maybe at least refrigeration. I don't know, but we hit a couple 90-degree days, and it was bad.
Commissioner McClendon.
Sounds horrible, but isn't this fall under the right to farm rules? The smells?
I don't know, but I think there's some language that requires things to be reasonable.
Commissioner Jasmani.
Well, I mean, you're not farming if it's dead. I just say it. Which reminds me of the famous Monty Python skit. It's not dead. It's just sleeping.
I'll invite you to take a little drive past the facility this summer sometime when it's good and ripe.
A bike ride.
Okay, I'm kind of getting a hint that it is time to move on to shoreline management with Cliff Strong and Ryan Erickson. When you go ahead, Cliff.
All right. Thanks, guys. Let's see. So following up tonight, so you've started Title 23. You've got through about half of it. At your last meeting, I made some changes. We reverted back to the original bulk and tables with the setbacks and all that stuff. You wanted copies of that, so I've included that in here. You didn't want to deal with it the same night you saw it. So I'm hoping we can get through that. And then Commissioner Mayberry, you asked about why certain agricultural practices are considered high intensity land uses, et cetera. And Ryan followed up on that with the state. So I'm gonna let him finish that answer.
Okay, so I called Rick Mraz, who's in charge of providing guidance to local jurisdictions on wetlands and regulations. And his take-home message, he had two of them. The first one about changing the definition is that locally we could change the definition. However, we'd have to show ecology through best available science why we're changing their definition. And so we'd have to come up with our own sort of analysis and white paper on why we categorized each ag operations, how we did it, which is kind of an uphill battle. That being said, he said that if you do that, they would look at it and review it. He did also mention that the Department of Ecology and the State Conservation District is working this exact situation out, because the wetland rating forms also look at intensity. And so they're trying to work together to figure out the best way to answer those questions. And then that would trickle down into their definition of intensity for wetlands under the buffer system. And so he didn't have a good time frame of when that was happening, but he said that they are working on it. So it may just be a wait and see thing.
Commissioner, maybe you got a question?
So you're saying that we could change those definitions?
We could. We'd have to come up with our own science and best available science, and ecology would then have to agree to it.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, I would like to make a motion to move the agricultural related land intensity definition or wording from the high intensity to move it all to the medium. The reason, no, can't do that. Sorry, Natalie's making a motion.
Sorry, you saw me go like this? No, I'm just saying, where are we talking?
It's in the definitions in 23, or not 23, 16. Is that right?
16, yes. I'll throw it up on the board here.
That's it.
Share. No, wrong one. Here you go. All right. Zoom in. So he's talking about this definition right here, high intensity land use. I think that's page 117.
Commissioner Mayberry, now that it's up on the screen, could you restate your motion?
Yeah, so my motion would be to strike the wording, the language, high intensity new agriculture with all the examples, and move that to medium intensity land use, with the exception of the words high intensity. And the reason for that, one, I don't believe that it belongs there in the same, we already talked about it, but the same category that has commercial, industrial, all of this pavement and development. But I'm also concerned that having agriculture in two separate tiers could end up having some consequences if for crop rotation, going back and forth from, say, blueberries or a pasture field to what basically tilling, any kind of agriculture that requires tilling.
So do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Commissioner Desmani, second. Okay. Let's see. And Ryan Erickson, you got your hand up to comment. Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that striking out would also include dairies, which would include CAFOs, with the raising and maintaining of animals, which have high water quality impacts. And so I don't know of any science that I could produce that could reduce that intensity. So remember, when we passed this motion, Cliff and I and our consultant would have to go through and comb all of the science and justify us moving this.
No consultant, Ryan, just you and I. We're done with him.
So.
And I don't, frankly, I don't think we could get that accomplished by the time this SMP has to be done.
Commissioner Hanson.
Well, it would seem to me that changing the wording first and then doing the technical study second is getting the cart before the horse, to use agricultural terminology. That, we don't say we want to change something. Now we want you to go out and find some reason why we should change it. I mean, we should look at it objectively. And I tend to have sympathy for having agriculture, reasonable agriculture, not be a high intensity use. But I think that we'd have to have first ask that a study be done, because if we don't get it properly established, there's no use in making this change, because it will be rejected by Department of Ecology.
Commissioner McClendon.
So I guess I'm unclear what the concern is. Is it just the annual tilling thing? Because you mentioned blueberries to something. Commissioner Mayberry?
Yeah, correct. So blueberries don't require annual tilling. They typically have grass in between the rows. And so my concern would be, you have a blueberry field and you want to grow potatoes on it. You take the blueberries out, grow potatoes, grow raspberries, whatever. You'd be jumping from a medium intensity, I don't know if that's the right word, back up to high. And could require you to follow buffers that you hadn't been previously.
So how would that work in the law? I mean, wouldn't you be
I prefer
suddenly
to
required to have bigger buffers?
Well, that's my concern, and maybe Cliff could answer that. And it's maybe more of a.
Yeah, and I don't have a hand raise thing in my thing. I think when I share screen, that goes away. So I'm sorry, but I was going to suggest, Ryan, if Ryan, you could talk about, I can move to the thing, but how it actually gets implemented, because isn't it used basically in reducing buffers?
Well, for ongoing ag, we don't assign buffers, because we let you work within it. It's mostly when you bring new ag on that doesn't meet the ongoing qualifications, they'd have a larger buffer. And there's a whole list of things in that section. So yeah, we normally, on ongoing ag, we don't assign a buffer to it.
So if I could jump in there. So the sentence says the clause is high intensity new agriculture. So if you're already growing blueberries and you convert to an annual crop like potatoes, is that considered new agriculture?
Then still be considered ongoing ag, but you'd have to get a different farm plan.
Right, but that's specific to your situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess I'm not convinced there's a problem with the language
We had originally proposed striking out the word new. So I don't know if that got changed last commission or not, but.
No, not, I think this is one we missed, Ryan.
Okay. The state definition doesn't include the word new, but our existing language in our code does.
Commissioner Jasmani.
So the main thing that I wanted to clarify is that the reason I'm supportive is as it relates to crop, not as it relates to CAFO. Because of course, you don't rotate in and out of CAFO. So it's the concern over crop rotations and having to deal with different compliance regimes just from routine rotation of crops. But if Ryan is saying is that that's considered ongoing ag, then I think that resolves my goal.
Commissioner Mayberry.
I would like to amend my motion to just strike out nurseries and raising and harvesting crops requiring annual tilling and move that to the medium intensity land use.
Do we have a second to the amendment? I will second that amendment. Commissioner Mayberry.
Sorry, I don't think my hand went down.
Oh, there.
And we're not getting other hands up here, but I will comment that as Commissioner Desmani said, the CAFOs was kind of, that's probably pretty high intensity. So I think this amendment is a good thing. Are there any other comments on the amendment? Tammy, would you call the roll to amend the motion?
I will. Okay. Commissioner Bartel?
Hey, we have comments.
And they weren't up here when I started, and it's okay. As I look back to the screen that I could see them. So go ahead, Commissioner McClendon.
So if we're moving these, I don't have a problem with moving them, but I don't know where we're moving them to. I look in the definitions under medium and there is nothing.
It's
So-
sorry, it would be under moderate intensity, moderate.
Moderate, okay.
Yep.
Ah, I see.
And the amendment
Okay,
simply to not move to change the motion, so it only moves those specific things.
okay. Got it.
And then we'll vote on whether we actually should move them or not. And Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, it's a bit of a question, I guess. My guess is that the tilling is in there because of the concern for runoff. And then you had it up on the stage or on the page up a little bit ago where it showed ways that high intensity can get a moderate buffer.
Correct.
Depending on their scores, their habitat scores. And so I'm wondering if maybe those would allow somebody that was doing a tilling crop to get down to those lower buffers while mitigating those concerns. Is that, am I understanding?
That's the idea. That was the idea behind it. I mean, we're given these definitions by DOE, and as Ryan says, we're not supposed to amend them unless we do our scientific work to show that it's different than the rest of the state, I guess. And it's used in, like Ryan said, in determining what type of CPEL or what type of farm plan you might need, but also in being able to reduce your buffers through some mitigations.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, so just in response to the tilling around in our area, runoff happens when fields aren't properly tilled, so that it doesn't drain. my guess is that this is put in as a state definition, mainly because on the east side, no-till farming results in less topsoil erosion due to wind, which is not something that we typically deal with. I guess if anyone has been driving around today, they might disagree, but it just doesn't happen as much around here. And this year was kind of unique in that a lot of the cover crops didn't get enough growing hours to grow. Normally, most of the county is covered in cover crops, but most, if not all, farmers would consider tilling as a positive for the environment as far as runoff goes.
Commissioner Masseri.
So I think it was said, but I just want to have it confirmed that there is these intensities are statewide on both sides, that the same thing they consider high intensity on the east side is the same as on the west side as far as these definitions.
Ryan, do you know if they have separate guidance for east and west?
No, they do not.
Okay, then yes.
Commissioner Mayberry, did you have more to say?
No, sorry, I don't think my hand went down.
Commissioner Desmani.
Could I see the list for moderate?
It's right up here.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Do you have more to tell us?
Yeah, and I think Commissioner Mayberry hit it on the head on our area in particular is the use of cover crop, and that would be what we would be looking at as a common practice on in the science on erosion control and runoff in our area would be the fact that most of our ag practices use a cover crop.
Are there any more comments on the amendment? And Tammy, can you state that amendment for us?
Okay, the amendment is to strike nurseries and raising and harvesting crops requiring annual tilling from the definition for high-intensity land use in 1616-900 definitions.
And move it to the moderate intensity land use definition.
Was that part of it? Okay, thank you.
That's part of the motion, but the amendment is instead of moving dairies and greenhouses, just to move nurseries, raising and harvesting crops requiring annual tilling. So we'll do the amendment first and then we'll get back to the motion. So Tammy, could you call the roll, please?
Okay, Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lund, I'm sorry, Commissioner Mayberry,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
Yes.
Commissioner Masseri,
Yes.
Commissioner Barth.
Yes.
Carries 8-0.
So now the motion is that those are struck out and that they are added to moderate intensity land use. Is there any discussion on this motion?
Yeah, well, based on what I've heard, it seems reasonable to me. I don't feel fully educated on the topic. And I also have the same concern that Commissioner Hanson brought up, that seems like we're doing it a little bit backwards with not having staff actually have the information, present that to us, and then have us say, yeah, we agree with that. We're saying we feel this way, staff go prove it. So I'm a little conflicted on the voting for it.
Commissioner Desmani.
I'm just curious about the nurseries. I think I understand what nurseries are, but I'm trying to think about what are the intensity issues around nurseries.
Commissioner Mayberry, go ahead.
Nurseries are operated in almost the same way that I guess production agriculture is you either have, I mean, I'm assuming that would apply to tree farms, ornamental tree farms, as well as plant stock production. It's fairly limited in our area, but as far as the intensity, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, I think that in nurseries here was intended to be like, you know, where people go to buy their plants, you know, and they have a bunch of stands up. They might have a barn or something with, I think that's the type of nursery, like a commercial nursery.
And this is Ryan. Yeah. It's interesting that nurseries was lumped into agriculture.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time they aren't considered ag. And so it's a strange thing to have there.
Yeah. They tend to be more commercial.
Right. We consider them commercial.
Commissioner McClendon.
No, I just wanted to say that I voted for the amendment, but I really, just because it was a better choice. But I don't think I want to mess with this right now. I think if there's a real concern that we need to have some background information to make a judgment. So I'm going to be voting no.
Commissioner Hanson.
Oh, I guess I'm not muted. I'd just like to say that there could be a higher intensity impact of nurseries because they keep the roots in the ground for a long period of time. And so it's quite common to use herbicides to control weeds because other ways of controlling them aren't available. So I think that might be a reason it would be in with higher intensity uses.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, sorry. When I think of nurseries, I think of our nurseries, which are we're basically just growing plant stock for the next year's planting. It surprises me that the definition that the staff uses for a retail plant selling operation, because I want to say most of those don't even grow their plants at that location. So
I should clarify. I was thinking of like the Wild's Old, where they grew their stock plants out on Sand Road. That would be considered a nursery, like a wholesale, where they're actually growing it. And then we would consider tree farms for, are typically ag and not forestry. Yeah, from like DeWild's Old wholesale out there on Sands where they grew all their stock, I would have considered that more of a commercial than ag.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm still going to stay with my same point. I just don't think that nurseries and then raising and harvesting crops should be in the same category as commercial and retail and all those. So
Commissioner McClendon.
So I look at these as, have you removed all the native vegetation, and are you doing it on a regular basis as high intensity? You gotta, if it's urban and commercial, any kind of building, greenhouses, dairies, nurseries, really, I mean, unless you're growing native plants and having lots of space in between them, you're removing all the native natural vegetation. And that's kind of why I see, annual tilling is basically, there's nothing there that is natural. And so I think that these all fit into high intensity, because if you look at the moderate, it's things like a utility corridors or rights of way where there's a lot of land, but the stuff that the man-made stuff is fairly limited on that land. Even building of roads, the road, it's the percentage of the land that has roads on it compared to all the land around it that you're not building a road on makes it a moderate intensity. So I guess that's how I judge the two. Maybe other people have a different idea than that.
Commissioner Jasmati.
I would say that roads feel very much high intensity to me. So, I think there's something that to look at in what's in the moderate category too, and I'm not sure why roads are seen as moderate intensity. But I was going to refer to the nursery. The subject of the nursery seems to be is like we don't have a clear definition, or do we? Is there a definition of nursery that we're using? If there's not, maybe we should have one.
Could you answer that?
I don't believe we define nursery.
We do not.
But I think why I have the microphone. What's important to realize in this category is how it relates to the actual buffer size. So it may be important to pull up the buffer table so that people can see the difference between the two, because it doesn't mean there's not a buffer at all. And then on the roads that they mention in the moderate category, those are logging roads. So, and then they are utility corridor and the maintenance roads for those, which are areas that aren't accessed very often. So it's not like a paved road that you were driving upon. And the utility corridors are maintained by brush hogging annually to make sure that vegetation does not grow back anything lower than grub level, because they have to be able to fly. Most of them are on our pipeline corridors, and they fly aerially to look at them for maintenance operations. So those are pretty much not a fully vegetated area. But this is how it's used in the land use intensity. So for instance, if you have a category 2 with a moderate habitat score of 6 to 7, moderate is 110 feet, and high intensity is going to be 150 feet. So you're talking 40 feet. It's not, so you have to look on how it's actually applied as well as what category it goes into, I think, to understand this.
And again, this would only be for new agriculture that's not classified as ongoing.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, I think Ryan kind of made the point I was going to try and make. This is really about the likelihood of those operations affecting the wetland and what's the required buffer or critical area, what the required buffer would be to eliminate those impacts. And I just don't see standard agriculture in our area needing to fall in the same category as development. And I'd also just like to point out that residential is considered moderate, and I would still consider agricultural use less of an impact than residential development. So.
Is there any further comments? Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Botel?
Yes.
Commissioner Desmonte?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson?
No.
Commissioner Jackson?
No.
Commissioner Mayberry?
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon?
No.
Commissioner Mosseri?
Same.
Commissioner Barton?
Yes.
So 4 ayes, 3 nays, 1 abstained, so it fails.
Point of order.
Yeah,
I realize I just lost that vote, but why are we requiring a majority of the commission on amendments? I thought we only required majority of the commission, as that is 5 votes, when we actually adopt things. I thought we just did a standard majority vote of those voting when we did amendments. That's been my experience.
This was, we did an amendment that we passed and then we voted on the motion, which was to move those items that are crossed out in yellow down to moderate.
Right, that's an amendment to chapter 16. We're not adopting chapter 16.
Mike, I just have one question. So there's eight present here tonight. So 4 would be a tie. And I believe you need more than a tie to carry it. Is that not correct? Or yeah.
That's
So
a good point.
my understanding is when we move send something, make a recommendation to the council, we have to have a majority of the entire commission, whether they're in attendance or not. So if we only have 7 people there, we still need 5 votes in favor to make a recommendation. But on any other vote, we just need a majority of those voting. So if somebody abstains, so we have 8 here, 4 voted yes, 3 voted no, and 1 abstained, the motion passes. Because you don't count the person who abstains. They have chosen not to participate in the decision.
Of course, and I marked him in absent instead of in abstain, which is the wrong column. So that actually reverses an earlier decision.
What was our vote? Just a moment.
So,
what was our vote on the earlier one?
But it was 4-3-1 as well, with 1 abstaining, not absent, and 1 absent. So, and that was Commissioner Hansen's, with, I believe it was the 5 minutes in the business rules. Yes. Yes. So that one actually carries then as well.
So do the business rules spell out how this is done? And if not, do they need to be amended?
Yeah. So if you'll hold this for a moment, I will rule that Commissioner McClendon is correct.
Okay.
On that one. I will hold off on Commissioner Hansen because we have some things that are, and I'm not sure this is one of them, but we have some things that require a 5 or more votes. I'm not sure amending the business rules falls into that category, but it's different than what this last vote was. And I'm not going to say that it passed or failed, but that we should take a look at it and make sure that we follow it correctly. So when we refer something to the council, if we only have 5 people here, we have to have all 5 vote for it to go to the council, to refer to the council. And that's, I know that one is, it takes 5 votes. And the one we just did, Commissioner McClendon is correct. And I'm just uncertain on changing the business rules.
So can I speak?
Yes, you can, please.
The business rules under page 2, quorum, number 6, quorum voting. It says the affirmative vote of 5 members is required for transaction of business when 9 members are present, and a simple majority when attendance is fewer, provided that statutory requirements for a larger majority on comprehensive plan and official controls shall be complied with, namely an affirmative 5 votes. So as far as we're concerned, it's only statutory votes.
If that be the case, then Commissioner Hanson's motion passed also. Okay, Commissioner Desmond.
There's a complication though, I think, and that is that Commissioner Hanson's motion passed, amended, and then people voted on the entire business rules. Assuming that Commissioner Hanson's motion, I'm raising a technicality. I don't know how people would have voted. But it's an important point to just clarify that that did affect the vote on the entire business rules. So I just want to raise that. Chair, you do what you want.
Okay. And Commissioner Desmani, you raised a valid point. Is there anyone that would have voted differently on those business rules? Commissioner McClendon? And I'm laughing behind this math.
We could just do a quick vote again.
Okay. Let me ask this question. Is there anyone that would have changed their vote? Just click the hand button. Okay. We'll go with it as we voted. All right.
Thanks, Natalie.
Okay. Cliff, you want to pick up again?
Sure. So we still have to finish up Title 23. Let me get back to that. Oops. And the memo, that's what I want, actually, 6. So if you recall, I informed you and I showed on the screen that who was it? I think it was Commissioner Mosseri noticed that there was differences in the tables in terms of setbacks, and some of the numbers didn't jive. And so I re-reviewed it all, and he was absolutely right. So I suggested we just go back to the original table with some modifications. I put a few modifications in there just to clean it up, but all the numbers remain the same. And I've added the land division section that we had put in our other thing and changed the words to read right. I'm hoping you guys have read all this and are good with it for me to put into the actual document. But I'm here for questions on it. It seemed like this was the holdup on approving, what was it, 2040, chapter 2040. You had been going through each chapter, tentatively approving them, and this is where you got held up.
I think we have some that are taking a look here real intently for a moment. Commissioners, are you ready for Cliff to move on? I think we have some still looking at it. Yeah, go ahead and move on there, Cliff.
All right. And the second part that I think it was Commissioner Mayberry raised some issues with some of the flood control language, and Ryan went to the WAC to try to figure out whether anything needed to be changed, and he came back with some revised language that I had showed you on the screen, but you hadn't had it to actually read, so we provided that in your memo. So I'm hoping everybody's good with this now. And Ryan, if you want to explain further, please do.
I think I'd just let the commissioners ask questions.
Okay. So it's all this red stuff was new here.
Ryan, while people are looking at it, last time I asked about getting the state definitions for 4 words. How did that go for you?
The state definition for what?
The should, shall, may, and fourth one was on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, they're already in our definitions in here.
Okay.
But people should know. I mean, if you want to pull it up real split screen, Cliff.
Yep.
The definition of shall, should, and may.
Shall means a mandate, action must be done. I enlarge that. Where'd it go? There shall, should is, where'd it go? Should means that the particular action is required unless there is a demonstrated compelling reason based on policy of the act in this chapter against taking the action.
And may.
May. I'm not sure if that one's actually. Oh, there it is. Means an action is allowable provided it conforms with the provisions of this program.
And those are basically verbatim state definitions for applying shoreline regulations.
And we had a 4th one, and I cannot recall what it is.
We have defined what's one of those ambiguous words that feasible. We have feasible defined, which is also a state definition.
Yeah, it wasn't feasible, but we'll look at it. We'll pull it up off the last meeting video. Commissioner McClendon, go ahead.
So I guess I need an explanation. I don't remember the conversation last meeting or the meeting before.
Relating to why we updated.
Why did you totally rewrite this? Because it appears to be totally rewritten.
For 2 reasons. What we were trying to, I talked to Ecology about the difference between shoreline stabilization versus flood control measures, flood hazard control. And Commissioner Mayberry had asked about under the flood control and shoreline stabilization measures, it appeared that you couldn't protect ag land. And so I went back and what I did is this is verbatim out of the state code for flood control works and in-stream structures and when you can and can't use those flood control works and in-stream structures. The flood control part is meant for large planning processes like what Paula does at River and Flood, where they have the whole Nooksack floodplain management strategy. And as long as your project fits within that management strategy, then you can do it. Whereas shoreline stabilization is meant for individual projects themselves to protect against erosion. Whereas flood is more for flood protection and erosion caused by flooding. To make it convoluted. So I just, instead of trying to write code to differentiate between that, I just took the code that the state has approved and put it into our SMP.
Okay, and so what are you taking out? I'm looking at the page we have here. Where is, it's on 122 in our original notebook. What does this new section, unclear where the new section goes and replaces what?
So there should
So
be a note.
this, yeah, so this is the language. We're just, it would read just like in your memo. It's just a copy of what's in the draft SMP. Remember, your older version, the very first version, is different than the second one I gave you, because we made some amendments.
Well, no, if you've given us a whole new chapter, I've
Right.
got the most recent
Okay.
one in
Yeah.
here. But I'm just trying to see, so
So I-
23.40.100
Yep.
flood control works and in-stream structures. I mean, it's totally different. I just need to know
Yeah, if you scroll down, Cliff,
where it ends, where the replacement ends.
so go back up, Cliff. So the gray numbers, you can kind of, so number 4 was the original number 1. So that whole section above that, which is 1 through 3 and A through I, is in front now. It used to start with structural or flood control work shall be permitted only. That should be the original number 1.
Oh, okay. So this is just inserted
Correct.
in front of the language.
Correct.
Okay, it's not replacing anything. All right, that's what I needed to know.
Okay.
And I added the word structural on number 4 because that's how the state.
Okay, so with those two things, we've answered all the questions you've had on chapter 2340. Are there any more, or is the commission ready to tentatively approve this chapter and move on to the next one?
Commissioner Hanson.
In our previous session, I was unable to find enough support for my amendment to delete D, which would allow mining in the CMZ and the floodways.
Let me get to it for them. That was under mining. So under.
Well, it's in here. It's in one, right now it's in D,
Oh.
4100D.
What?
2D.
D? There is no D. Oh, this one here.
Right.
No?
Yep. Perfect. Right.
Okay.
General. So I didn't find support for the idea of striking that, even though I think it'd be a good idea now to have mining in the Channel Migration Zone. Part of the reluctance was that that zone has never been really defined formally, and it could be considered the whole width of the valley, etc. But I'm wondering if I could get support for amendment that would just add except in the floodways, because the floodways are very much more well-defined and narrower area, which is where the river runs primarily when it goes over its banks. It's like a secondary channels for the river. So I would like to make the a motion that amended D, mining insert except in the floodways when conducted. Reason when the river is going to go there, it's really not very ecologically sound to put big pits that the river is then going to run into.
I'll second for the purpose of discussion, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Hanson, did you want to speak more?
Well, that's pretty much it. I just think that maybe I could get support for excluding mining in the floodways.
Commissioner Masseri.
I'm going to have the same feelings I had last time. It's really hard to vote for or against something that I don't have really good examples of. You know, we talk about it really generally, and I think that it sounds reasonable, but on the ground, I just can't see how this affects things actually on the ground, because I'm not given an example on a specific property or in a general valley or any of that. So it's really hard to know what its impacts are going to be.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Can we have staff explain the requirements in order to get a mining permit within the floodway or even river that currently? Because my understanding is it's pretty difficult and there's requirements that you're not going to impact habitat. My concern is that there could be good reasons for removing material, and taking it completely out just limits our options to do good.
So yes, you would need, we'll start at the top and work our way down to us. So you need a federal permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, who would have to do a NEPA process and figure out if there's been any Endangered Species Act impacts, along with a consultation with both U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the National Marine Fisheries. And once you get past that permit, you've got to get a permit from Ecology for Water Quality. You got to get a permit from Department of Fish and Wildlife for an hydraulic project approval application, and they will look at impacts to state priority habitat and species. And then if you get past that, then you come to us with a permit for a local permit, which would then have to meet no net loss of ecological functions, protecting all of the federal listed species as well as all the state listed species and candidates, and meeting our definition of no net loss.
Plus all these other requirements down here.
Yeah, and that's all current, correct?
Yeah, to do it today, you'd have the same hurdles to jump through.
Yeah, I guess I just don't see as this really being an issue if you have to go through all those agencies and requirements, and it would seem to me it would have to be a pretty positive reason for doing it. So I'm still going to vote no on this one.
Commissioner Desmani.
I'd like to know of an example, which maybe Commissioner Hanson has an example in mind, which something like this has recently happened or has been proposed to happen. So.
Well, I guess if I should speak, I think, first of all, I'd want to remind Commissioner Mayberry that removal of gravel for flood control purchases is already an allowable action. And as far as Commissioner Desmani's question, I would think our job would be to consider if something makes sense rather than waiting until someone wants to do it to decide it makes sense. And if there's no real good reason to be doing something, why should we even put in our regulations the illusion that it could or should be done?
So I would like to ask a question of staff, and that is, let's say that this verbiage was in that it had to be in a flood area. And how do you determine a flood area? I know you can determine it from things that happened in the past, but how do you determine when a flood area changes before a flood happens?
So the floodway is mapped by FEMA, and that's they have a model that they run, and so they model the floodway, and then they produce what's called firm maps or firm panels that have the floodway designated on them, and they periodically update those. The channel migration zone, however, is a little bit harder, and in Whatcom County, we have chosen not to map the entire channel migration zone, and we would require it at the project submittal, at time of submittal. And there is a way to, that ecology has to determine how to designate the channel migration zone.
How often is that updated then?
The channel migration zone?
Yes.
The guidance was most recently updated in 2016, I believe. But Whatcom County does not have a predetermined map. We do it on a project by project basis. So at the time of the project is when the channel migration would be determined.
Commissioner Masseri.
Yeah, I think this was brought up last time, and I don't know that we got a resolution to it or an answer. What is the duration that they're looking for the channel when they're looking at something to say, yes, this is in the channel migration zone? What is the duration? Is it going to be, the river could go there in 50 years, 100 years? Do we know that?
That'd be a really good question for Paula, because she does the site-specific analysis when they do major projects within the Nooksack. And so I've sat in on the presentations, but I can't tell you the exact numbers you're talking about. But they do look at a large historical river aerials, as well as the LiDAR, to see where it has gone in the past and where it has recently gone, and they kind of map it out. And so she'd be a really good resource to talk about on how they actually do it.
I would appreciate it if we could table this and have her write up or come to the next meeting and give us some information on what this practically looks like, what kind of areas we're talking about. It would help me be a lot more educated on it.
Specifically, what would you want to know? I guess I'm not following that.
Just what example of what the channel migration zone looks like, how wide it is, and what they're taking into consideration. Also, what kind of area we're talking about. I don't know the square footage, and I know they may not have it 100% mapped, but what kind of area along the river are we talking? And maybe she doesn't have that information, but those are questions I have. How big of an impact are we having on the ground with this?
So Cliff, for an example of how they determine it, the line lowering project by Highway 9 would be a really good recent project that Paula could do a quick little write-up of how they determined that area for the scouring down to the pipeline that was being exposed. And
what was the name of the project?
It's the line lowering project.
Lime lowering?
Line, L-I-N-E, line lowering.
Oh, lowering.
Yeah. And then on the area, yeah, she may have an idea with their long-term flooding work they're doing right now on the Nooksack flood management plan. They may have an idea of what that area looks like.
But so having her tell you that, what would it change in terms of what we're looking at here, I guess?
I feel like it's hard to vote on whether or not we want to do something in a certain area if we don't have a clear picture of what that area looks like in our county.
Back to Commissioner Hansen's point. Is that what you're?
Yes, I meant specifically on this motion.
Bear in mind, I'm only talking about floodways, which is quite different than this channel migration zone. And we do have a map of floodways you could look at.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to be able to look at all of that in conjunction with making a decision on this.
So we actually had a motion in table, but we didn't have a second to hold that up. So I have to say that right now.
I'll second that.
Well,
didn't you make the motion?
Yeah, but I think it makes sense if people want more information before they vote on it. Why not delay it and get more information?
I'm sorry, I realized that Commissioner Masseri can make it again, but we actually went quite a while here without a second to motion. Commissioner McClendon, go ahead.
I would suggest that Commissioner Hanson and whoever seconded it, just withdraw the motion and we'll make the motion next time after we see the maps.
So, at any rate, I just trying to be accurate here. I do not care, and I will say it would not be inappropriate for Commissioner Masseri to make motion again to table, if you so choose.
I'm sure. I'll make a motion that we table the motion until next time and receive more information from staff.
Commissioner Hampton, did you want to second that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to table till the next meeting. And this will be, there's no discussion on whether we should or not according to Robert's Rules of Order. So Tammy, I know you're typing there for a moment. And when you're ready, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
No.
Commissioner Mayberry,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
Yes.
Commissioner Masseri,
Yes.
Commissioner Barton.
No.
Okay, it carries 6-2.
So we tabled it.
So we will bring it up the next meeting.
Okay.
And whether I can get Paula to join us, it depends on her schedule. I don't know if it'll be the next meeting, maybe after that, and, I'll have to talk to her.
Yeah, Cliff, I might recommend maybe she can just write something up and produce a little map.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but we'll see. I'll talk to her about it.
Yeah, I'd also be curious if there's any current mining operations going on in the floodway, and maybe we can see an actual example of what that looks like.
Commissioner Mayberry.
I don't know if Paula would have any good examples of what may be a positive mining operation in these areas, but just to respond to Commissioner Hanson's earlier point, we don't know what a good reason for mining within the floodway is going to look like until it arrives. So if she does have any examples of where that has created a positive impact, that would be nice to know as well.
Okay, so regarding chapter 2340, then this is, at least from what I've heard, this is the last bit of information you'd like before you move on it? Or are there other issues in there that people would like to talk about?
None for me.
Then how about chapter 2350, non-conforming use of structures and lots?
Commissioner Mayberry.
Rather than go through each one of these, I don't have anything else in all of 23. I don't know if anyone else does, but that may be a question for the rest of the commission.
Cliff, would you go ahead and continue then?
All right, well, are we gonna, is it gonna be, so previously, I'm just saying what you've done before. You did individual motions for each chapter, tentatively approving them. So we know that we don't have to do any more work on them. do you want to continue that practice, or we're just leaving it as is?
Commissioner Mayberry.
I'll make a motion to approve all of chapter 23 with the exception of 23.40 for tentative approval.
I'll second that.
Jackson.
Can't do one there.
Mayberry, would you like to speak to that? I see your hand is still up.
Sorry, no, for some reason it's not going down automatically. I'll have to keep a closer eye on it.
Seeing no one has raised their hand for discussion. Tammy, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Desmani,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mayberry,
Yes.
Commissioner McClendon,
Yes.
Commissioner Masseri,
Yes.
Commissioner Barton.
Yes.
All right, that carries 8-0.
Okay. Go ahead, Cliff.
Yep, let me finish recording what we've done, what you've done.
And commissioners, any thoughts on how late you would like to go tonight?
All right, file, save as, what's today? Today is 2/11.
I mean, I think maybe 15 minutes is maybe not enough time. I like to be done at 9:30, but 50 minutes may not be enough time to deal with another issue. I don't know.
Short, well, the next thing to do is to go back through 1616, the critical areas, and see if there are any more comments on that. However, I do want to point out, I kind of skipped over this, that I did provide you with the no net loss addendum. I gave a copy of it in your packet. It was prepared by our consultant. It was the last thing they did. And contrary to one of the comments you heard earlier from somebody speaking, is that there was a baseline done, and I pointed out here in our inventory and characterization report, the scientific literature review, restoration plan, and the cumulative effects analysis. So that is the basis. We are not required to do a periodic update to revise those unless we're doing something that's, you know, substantially different, like providing, you know, putting new designations, changing designations, or substantially increasing densities or something like that. And we haven't done any of that. For the most part, the policy choices, the policy changes that we're making are to get additional mitigation for shoreline development. Well, they're all listed in his memo. He went over the big ones and came to the conclusion that overall we're getting, you know, we're treating the environment better through this version than through the previous one.
Commissioner Mayberry.
Yeah, I just kind of agree with Commissioner Desmani. I noticed that we only have 2 attendees left, and some of this stuff, it would be nice to have a member from the development community to talk on the impacts of some of the additional changes. So I'd like to see us wait till next meeting and hopefully recruit a couple of representatives of that industry before we move on.
Did you call on me?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I wanted to speak to the no net loss thing because I want to clarify now. So Cliff, you're saying there is a baseline?
Yep, it's pointed out in that first paragraph.
Okay, so in the conclusion by the consultants, they say monitoring key indicators is an effective way to ensure the standard of no net loss is being achieved. Are you saying we're not doing that? We have a baseline, but are we are we monitoring key indicators?
Probably not as well as we could be, but that would take, you know, some funding and staff and all that stuff. I think the key thing so under the state law, I think we went over this a year and a half ago or something. I did a PowerPoint presentation on how this all works. And there was a graphic in there that showed you from the state guidance. But, you know, the state and we assume that doing development in the shoreline will have an impact on the shoreline functions. We try to minimize that by requiring mitigation for when vegetation's taken out, et cetera, things like that. But overall, when development happens, even with mitigation, there is still a loss. To make up for that, we have our restoration plan, which are kind of big projects around the county that were identified. And we prepared a restoration plan addendum showing which ones have been done, which ones are outstanding, and some suggestions for new ones. The key to really achieving it is to implement that restoration plan better, because I think people forgot about it. It sat on a shelf, and I don't know, it turned out that we did some of those things. You know, Public Works through some of their project did some of those things. The tribes have done some of them. Some of the nonprofits have done some of those projects. So we have made progress, but there hasn't been a concerted effort to kind of tick off those things as we're doing them. We had to kind of, you know, talk to a lot of people to figure out what things had been done. But you know, there should be like in our annual budget, perhaps, restoration work done towards that restoration plan. And so that's how you really achieve overall the no net loss. We do as much as we can through the development permits, but the state allows development in the shorelines, their preferred uses. You know, you can't mitigate every single thing in there, but you do as much as you can. And then the remainder of it is supposed to be made up through the restoration efforts. And really those types of projects should be, like I said, funded, you know, regularly and followed through on, and not just kind of willy-nilly, which is how it's been done here.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Ryan, did you want to weigh in there?
Oh, I just wanted to weigh in that, you know, the Wildlife Advisory Committee has also done some analysis as well on the state of the functions of Whatcom County. They have updated their ecosystem systems report that will be coming out. They've recommended, you'll be seeing them next meeting. They've recommended a few 3 species to be put onto the local species of concern list. They've been working on identifying all of these things in little 3-page white papers on each of these species, so that it's easy to digest in the community as well as with the Planning Commission. The state also has put guidance that says that we, as local jurisdictions, they don't recommend that we actually do the detailed scientific analysis, and to leave that to state agencies and to universities, and that we are supposed to focus on implementing our regulations to their fullest, as well as working on our restoration plans. And so that's what we've been directed to do.
So if you remember way back when, again, a year and a half ago or so, when we started this, we had a lot of discussions on what this means and everything, and monitoring. And I gave you and the council a memo that explained the 3 levels of monitoring. One's, you know, are you implementing your code correctly? Secondly, are the permits that you're implementing, are they following through on restoration and all that? So we do those 2 first things. And what Ryan was talking about, what the state is recommended that we don't do, that we leave it to the state, is kind of the regional wide things that the state agencies should be monitoring at that level. So we do the monitoring on our permits. We monitor to make sure that the code is being implemented properly. We haven't produced a report. Ryan and I were working on towards that, but he's gone now, so you know who knows what I'm just ribbing him. But you know that I know we have the intent to follow through on that, but with the COVID and everything, so many things fell off the table for now.
Commissioner Hanson.
Well, I have a tendency not to feel like I could approve the no net loss addendum, and I have the same concerns that Ms. Harris did about the fact that the baseline is from 2007 and a lot's changed from then. And just because we don't have a legal requirement to do something doesn't mean that it wouldn't be best practice to do something. Of course, if we don't have funds, it's hard to do it. And I think I brought this back up 2 or 3 years ago, asking that the council should allocate funds to do this properly. Big concern I have is with what Cliff was just talking about, because the state regulations presume that and I'm quoting, that they presume that no net loss will only be achieved if we implement our restoration plan. So having a plan means very little. It's implementation, but not only that, but the third level of monitoring after implementation is effectiveness. And that's one that is much more difficult to verify, but that's one that triggers the adaptive management that the people have the bond out there to achieve if the mitigation hasn't been effective. So I would say that unless we can verify that these projects that are in the project list have been done and have been done effectively, we have to presume that there is a net loss going on and we're not meeting our legal or moral requirements. So I think that's part of why I'm always looking for stricter regulations. And I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much that we incorporate everything that the state is requiring us to incorporate, because I think we could go further than that. And so that's the problem I have with this whole no net loss statement.
Can I comment on the effectiveness?
Yes, Ryan, please go ahead.
Okay, so through my tenure there at the county, we slowly made progress towards the effectiveness, as Cliff alluded to. I've numerous times have employed, I guess not really employed, we didn't pay them, but had recruited interns from Western to work on that, from a permit review as well as GIS exercises. We have been slowly digitizing in all of our wetlands over the last 5 years.
And those are finished now, Ryan. We heard the other day.
Yeah, and so I'll get to that. What's finished is the mitigation. We have just recently gone through all of from 2001 up into 2020, have all of our mitigation sites now digitized into GIS. And so the hope is over the years, Fish and Wildlife will continue their high detection resolution imagery files, and we can compare through time that these mitigation sites are actually A, still there, and B, producing the vegetation that we had hoped. So we will be able to do that effectiveness monitoring over time. And then eventually we'll have all the wetlands done and digitized in as well. These are also mitigation sites on the shorelines, as well, marine shorelines, as well as our freshwater streams, which are already mapped. And then ecology has a process for determining the effectiveness of your buffers based upon the current vegetated state and the distance to infrastructure and buildings. And so the next stage of this GIS exercise is to then put the correct buffers on all these features and then do a aerial analysis of the vegetation and the structures and what's been converted and what's not. So we're slowly getting to that effectiveness, Jim. At
And I
this
know-
rate, maybe another 2 or 3 years, but we're trying to get there.
And I remember, shoot, I don't know, it was when I first got here, working on the CAO. Again, this issue of monitoring came up, and we actually worked with the state on that, at the time, nascent change detection project they have. And if I recall off the top of my head, it was like less than 1% of the shoreline had actually, or the riparian areas had actually changed in Whatcom County in, over 10 years. I could pull those numbers out, but it was a very small percentage of impacts compared to what people seem to have thought.
And the largest impacts in that study were when the poplar farms were converted to other ag. And so it showed this big change in tree canopy, but there actually were the poplars and not native vegetation.
So I wasn't asking you guys to approve the no net loss addendum or anything like that. I know you'd been asking for it for a while, and I kept saying it's coming. So I thought I'd throw it out there just for you guys to start reading it. It is it's something it's a product from our consultant, so I don't have the authority to change it. It's their analysis, and it's basically in the format of the conclusions of the cumulative effects analysis, our original one. So yeah, I mean, when I first saw it, I thought, well, there's no data here or anything, but it turns out that that's precisely the way it was done back then, and it's what ecology is looking for. Now, but when we do, after a public, when we get close to adopt or, making a recommendation to the council on this, I will tie all this stuff together. I'll produce a big staff report with everything we've talked about. I'll go probably pull out some of those old memos about the mitigation monitor or the monitoring and the restoration plan and all that stuff, and kind of try it together for you guys. But I wanted to ask Commissioner Mayberry about something he said a minute ago, and that was that you wanted to invite people to your next workshop to talk about something. And I'm just wondering, I mean, that's what your public hearing is for. I'm just posing the question, do we want to get into asking people to come to your workshops, or do you want to wait for the public hearing to hear from people, and then we address everything from there? It's up to you. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I just think it's helpful. Some of these things like connectivity, what that's actually going to do to impact where buildings can go. I think it's just helpful to have people that actually have to deal with buffers related to development to ask questions for. So that's my only reasoning for that.
Commissioner Hampson.
I support Commissioner Mayberry's sentiment on this, because in my experience, work sessions are where changes have happened, and public hearings are more pro forma. So I think it'd be excellent to make any changes we might need to make before we go to public hearing.
Commissioner Desmati.
I would just add that it would be good to, if we can, maybe Commissioner Mayberry, Commissioner Mosseri can try to identify the right expertise to bring, and I see Carly still in the attendees, and so she may also like to present some comments related to the buffers and connectivity too. So it's always been helpful in the past when we've had this kind of expert input.
Commissioner Mosseri, our are you up for that?
Yeah, I'm happy to reach out. I would contact the BIWC and ask if they want to send anybody, or if they have people that they want to pass that on to. That'd be my route for doing that.
And Commissioner Mayberry, I know we can't have a quorum or anything, but you want to communicate with Commissioner Masseri and arrange the two of you together to arrange for some people to come.
Yeah, I can try. I don't have a whole lot of contacts in the development world, but seemed like, I can't remember his name, but one of the attendees from our last meeting seemed to have some opinions on the changes. So I'll try and track him down.
Yeah, but thanks to both of you, and I'm sure Commissioner Masseri, you probably have quite a number of contacts and can come up with some that would give us some really good information.
Commissioner Mayberry, do you mean Ed Miller from Miller Environmental, who talked about the buffers with me?
Yeah, I think so.
We have a list of local consultants that we have workshops with. We could probably send out something to them so that you hear more than just from Ed. You could hear from some of the other people. So I know that Katrina Jackson has submitted comments before, as well as North Ecological Services as well. So we can reach out to those people as well for you.
That would be great.
I forget who all was there, but when we talked about these buffers 2 years ago or whenever that was, some of those people had sat in and they had looked at how the buffers would have affected projects that they had done in the past year, or what that length of time was. That was really helpful to get a picture of what these effects have on the ground.
And I can give you that memo back again, because we laid it all out in there.
I think that was just specific. Yeah, it's great to have. I think that was just specific to those buffers, and maybe some of those would have comments on other things that are in the update.
So, commissioners, we are at 9:35. What is your pleasure? Is that a goodbye wave, or?
It's a hello wave. He wants to stay longer.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. All right. I think we have concurrence on this. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.